All right, I want to talk a little bit about edge extend before we eventually get to our big work, which is going to be using the Uber keyer, which I'm sure you're all excited to learn about. But again, this is not the Uber keyer, so to speak. This is just the basic keyer I've been showing you guys with some core fundamentals, which allows you to kind of understand as we get into the bigger keyer where everything plays a part. So what I have here is an entire comp again done with Jessica. So let's go ahead and just show you the footage. So here's Jessica waving her hand, and we have that nasty light pollution there. The whole idea of this tutorial specifically is that we will be going over edge extend. So this is really what this lesson is about, using the actual gizmo edge extend or extended RGB. And of course this is in here, and you can also take this with you to wherever you go. Edge extend is the last thing you should do after all else has failed in regards to trying to color correct the edges of your character via your D-spill. When all else fails, okay, you will go ahead and try out what's called an edge extend. But this is secondary, not the primary fix, because this can cause artifacts, as I will show you, when you overuse it or abuse it. So it is not the end-all be-all, because it blurs your edges a little bit along your D-spill. So be aware that it works very subtly if you need that just extra little oomph, but it is not something that you just go goofy on, okay, or go ballistic on it and over abuse it. So anyway, long story short, let me just go ahead and go through this comp really quick so we can kind of get an idea of what's going on. It's the same setup as we had for the last lesson. We denoise it. Here you can see I do a core, and I take the time to actually learn from this compositing. The way you're going to learn green screen is not by one composite that I show you. It's you going in and practicing your own and trying out your own, because you have to own these comps. And what I mean by that is you have to be able to solve the problems that are going to be so specific to whatever shot you're creating on your own, whether you're shooting with your own footage or with the footage that I have provided. So be aware of that, that you need to own it. In other words, you can't go to a manual and be like, oh, I don't know what happened. You need to figure it out and problem solve it yourself. A great artist has a pioneer spirit of discovery, of trying new things, and also one of just a critical eye, one who looks at it, looks at every single hue difference, on the corners, and says, I'm not happy with that. I'm pushing it to the umpteenth level to make it look really real. I'm not going to just let some green spill sit in some area and let it be, or have it not match, and also be able to take critique from other people as well. I just want to also preface this by saying that this is not a perfect comp. I threw this together, so if you're going to be complaining about the color correction work, please don't. So anyway, each artist has their own way of working, by the way. You'll notice that when you work at a studio with multiple compositors, as you open up their comps and go in there and do your part, you'll find that everybody has a different way of working. I think I talked about this before. Some people like using channel merges. Others like to use merge screens when they merge together their mats. So there's a whole bunch of different possibilities. So let me go ahead and go into the primat here. So you can see this is just a general primat, cleaning up the background, foreground noise. And then I come to the grade node here, play a little bit with the gamma, a little bit with the black point, and then I do an erode here. As you can see, as I slam the gamma, we're still good. And the blur, as you can see here. Now, I'm working off of frame 85, so if you load up this comp, I've only made this comp work for frame 85. The rotos have not been animated, so don't be like, why am I on this frame and it looks weird? So go to frame 85. So, all right, the fringe mat, let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, again, I had a choice between the atypical IBK color single and then the daisy chain version. So if I take a look at the two, I'll go ahead and put my viewer to this and just show you. I'll just switch it back and forth. You can see in this circumstance, the version that is actually the daisy chain worked much better. So you can see here, I'll take a look at the final results of these. You can see I still have a little bit of hair noise here and some little splotches here and there through this process, but you can see because I've gotten a closer sampling localized of the areas, I'm getting a heck of a better result in comparison to this versus this. And I'll go ahead and just show you again here. Let me just switch this back and forth. So you can see here to here. See that? Big difference. So again, sometimes the single versus the daisy chain version of the IPK works. Try both of them, like I said. All right, so the grade node, I went ahead and graded this to 0.04. You can see there is noise down here. But if I were to click on any one of these pixels, you could see the values are below 0.5 in the alpha, and that's important because if it is, then we have to crush a little bit more. This area we're going to go ahead and take out with a roto mask. So you can see I've created this mask here and blurred it, and then I went ahead and just cut that out. Again, I'm kind of throwing this together really quick. And then I've screened together both the core and the fringe mat, and you can see it's filling this area in pretty nicely, maybe going a little overboard in certain areas here. I have the quality check here, which basically floods my actual alpha to the RGB channel, so I could switch to RGB, and now I can go back and forth between the original and just see what I've lost, or what I'm over cranking. Like for instance, this might be over cranking this area of this hair because you can see this is still semi-transparent, yet it's coming out pretty more opaque than it needs to. Same thing here, same thing here. As you can see, this is a little overboard. But we are getting all these nice hair follicles. We're retaining all of this detail, and that's what that's what you're fighting for, by the way, through this whole process. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and just poke around here. We'll jump over to our edge despill. I'll go ahead and just show you what has been created here. I've got a key mix here, simply because she's going to have the sun behind her right here, and over here is this general red complexion. And this was just me fiddling with the screen color here and here for each one of these independently. And also you look at the alpha bias is very high in the red in regards to these two edge despills. Now this affects the skin tones as you fiddle with this, making her more of a purple people eater, but ultimately this is only going to be affecting the edge and not so much the core. Remember, the core, as we come over here, is meant to bring back the luminance and add it back in, so we have this typical expression. We take this merge node, get our actual information for despill, desaturate it, and reapply it as a plus so we don't lose any luminance information as we take out the green information. And we brought it all back to our image, and the core looks good. The skin tones are not touched. They look perfect. So this area, the skin tones, you can see the difference here if I go back and forth. There has been some play in the actual skin tones, which is a no-no when it comes to the edge despill. But the edge despill is going to be limited via this mask here, which is our core, coming in from our core here. And then of course I added a stencil here where I actually erased this area, these areas here, which are heavy in the hair. And the reason why I did that was simply because those areas I want to be with the edge despill, the hair specifically. So this can be an animation roto nightmare where you have to animate these rotos. Again, I'm on frame 85 here just for the sake, because I didn't animate these. You can see I only have one frame. So the key mix comes in, and if we take a look, it's looking kind of interesting because it's got different colors and so forth. But in general, we have this area here a little bit brighter because the sun will be behind her head. We copy in the alpha now, so you can see now it's good to go, and it just needs to be pre-malted. Then I do some color correction work here, where I just do some general dealings with the black and white points to kind of match them up. And then I have this roto mask here for the sun area that I add a grade of brightening and then saturation I bring down a little bit, so it kind of blows out the hair area as much as possible. And then here I'm going to go ahead and, for the sake of this demonstration, go ahead and disable this. This is the actual edge extend. I don't want to turn it on yet, because I want to show you the issues. So here's the pre-malted version. We have a color of the backing region that matches the eventual plate shot, which you can see here is this sunset. So if we take a look at that, right, together with this merge, and all this is, by the way, is the sun reformatted, transformed, did a little bit of grading, and then I used a ramp to bring in a little bit of the blue hue that was lit by the actress. We actually had a blue fill light on the front of her. So I'm trying to introduce a little bit of that twilight, if possible, or that bluish horizon to kind of cheat a little bit. it is a hack cheat to try to color correct your background plate, your background image to match with your footage, unless of course obviously one can either dictate the other. Sometimes you have to color correct to the actual green screen plate of the person on the green screen, and then the opposite is the other way around, where you're actually color correcting her to match the background. So or the background to match her, which is very rare, of course. But regardless, we go ahead and just jump over here to our final merge, and it's looking really good. Now we still have issues. This is where you got to come in and be critical. Did you lose the gradient in here? Is it a sharp fall off? Now edge blurs are another way of kind of softening this effect. So after the actual pre-malt, which is right here, we can add an edge blur, which you don't want to do too much of this, maybe like 1 or 2 pixels or something. And you can see what it's going to do. It's kind of melding it together. Now we still don't have light wrap. We don't have that awesome despill per edge region plugin or whatever, or script that I'm going to show you, which is in the Uber keyer. We do not have anything like flares or anything like that added. Again, there's nothing in here that is actually helping it really mend to the background just yet. But you can see this edge blur does help a little bit in kind of dealing with those harsh edges. But we still have, and this is where you have to pay attention, obviously, is to come in here and look for halos around your character or black lines around your character. You're either going to have one or the other, or you're going to have nothing. In this case, this is pretty much nothing because it's a highlighted color. But when you get dark, white, dark, or white, dark, white, it's going to be telling you that you need to fix these areas. You can see there is a green tinge on her hand here, so there could be more work needed to be done in the despill via hue correct rotos. Here you can see that this obviously needs a lot of work in here, but we have maintained all these nice hair details. The background, of course, needs some grain and some defocus as well, which you could add, but I'm not kind of worrying about that right now. But in general, you can see it's looking pretty good. So when you come to a point where you get to issues like this, okay, so if we kind of go back and take a look at our alpha here, let's go ahead and take a look. This is a heavy gradient here. So when we talk about edge extend basically means it's going to take, this is like the opposite in the way that we smeared the IBK in. This is actually going to do that outwards. So if I were to create a Rotopaint node here really quick, and let's go ahead and just look at the footage here. What this is going to do, what edge extend basically does, is come in here, and I'll go ahead and add a smear tool here. And what it's going to do is your alpha, and again, I'm only going to fiddle with RGB here. Your alpha, okay, is going to stay the same. So this is going to stay the same. You're not going to touch this alpha. This is a big thing in Hollywood. You do not get to change the matte line of where it is in the real world. You have to solve it on your own. So how do you do that without, what can you do? Well, you can extend the edge by doing a blur and almost like a vector smear of the edge here. So I'm actually affecting the RGB here. I am blurring and streaking this footage, as you can see, right? So let me go ahead and add a pre-mult to this, right? So here we are. So you can see the alpha is the same, so I'm going to go ahead and add a pre-mult here. So let's go ahead and take a look. If I take the Rotopaint node and turn it off and on, you see what that did? The alpha edge has not changed, but the RGB has been smeared from a point or an edge. You get to define that edge with the edge extend via a eroded alpha edge. So you define where the blurring starts universally, and it's doing exactly what I'm showing you here. It's smearing the edge along the normal, and it's smearing it out according to a line you define that is distant, perpendicular to the actual surface. So you can see now, once you have that going, I can go ahead and just come in here, and I guess in this case I'm going to unpremult it, or actually I'll just leave it as in here and just put it through the pipeline here. Let's go all the way down to the bottom here with my cheese ball version of this process. So you can see we've basically eliminated the issue. We probably could use a little bit more smearing here, right? So if I come in here again and just push this in this is pretty pathetic what I'm doing, and it's something you don't want to do on a Final Comp because it'll look like it's seen in Lord of the Rings where Frodo is in the netherworld. But do you see what I'm talking about here? And again, I can have my viewer set to this viewer here and go to this Rotopaint node and just come in here ever so slightly and start to pull this in like that, right? So I'm just showing you, I'm not saying this is what you should do, but I'm just showing you what the edge extend does, what it technically does. It solves the problem of maintaining the edge so we don't have that keyhole effect I talked about, but at the same time, just a little bit of a nudge of repeating the pixels that are here further down the line and filling in any weird artifact, right? So you can see it's looking good. There's no real problem over here. It's only in certain areas, usually in motion blur. And it can get very tricky here. Usually I will cut out any core area when the hand is waving, because the core, when crushed, if the hand is 100% transparent from her waving, you should have no core in this area. So I'll stencil out the core of anything that's crazy. Like for instance with Sam Jackson, there was a part where he raised his hands really quick to talk about the credit card, and ultimately we had to just take that core information out. So we basically chopped off his forearms in the core, but of course the fringe mat was still there, and we had to go in with a little bit of Rotopaint work to bring back that alpha. So it was a lot of meticulous work, so be aware of that. So you've seen all this as is. Let's go ahead and poke around. I want to again just show you before I unveil the awesome edge extend here and how you should not abuse it, because we're going to show it. I'm going to show the artifacts of it. So over here I have this edge extend easy example. This is a great way of demonstrating the issue. So I've made this kind of like crappy little object here, which if you can see it, it's an alpha object. It is currently, it is what it is. And if we take a look here, we could see we have this green edge here, right? So you have this green edge, right? And this green edge it is what it is, right? So you can see, it's pretending as if this is the actual green screen edge of an actual character that you would have, right? Usually a little light pollution there and you want to get rid of. So I'm just kind of, creating this artificially again. I could also hit unpremult if I wish, and unpremult the image, and you can see this is basically what's been created. There's nothing going on. I think it's already unpremulted. It's not premulted yet. So the edge extend, and this whole little thing you can add together. It's not very complicated. The edge extend itself has two options here, and I believe you can get this off of Nukepedia, by the way. So just look up edge extend inside of Nukepedia. I think there's a whole bunch of versions. This is the control mat, and this is the image. So you can see I'm plugging in the image, and I'm offshooting a filter erode of the original image. And in this case, I've eroded it 14 pixels, which is pretty extreme. So it's eroding back. I'm defining the line that it's going to smear, okay? And I'm going to show you how tight little corners like this will give us issues. So you can see what's happening here. I'm eroding in. This is just defining the line, and that is the input to the control mat, as you can see here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what this does. So there you can see what is going on. We basically extended the line, and it's streaked it across. Now, you're getting interesting artifacts in these tight corners here. You see this stuff? Here's where if you take the extension further than I would say maybe 5 pixels or whatever, you're going to start to see artifacts. You're going to see a blurred edge around the character. So what exactly does this edge extend option have? Well, first thing you have to ask yourself is, the incoming image, is it unpremultiplied or premultiplied? Well, in our case, it is unpremultiplied, right? So we're going to put this to unpremultiplied. If it's premultiplied, make sure this is set to premultiplied. It's asking you, the incoming image coming in, what is it, premultiplied already or unpremultiplied? Make sure you get that right, or else it's not going to work correctly. So now with this edge extend, we have taken the line we've defined here, which is, an eroded version of the original alpha, and we've said, okay, start from here and smear out. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. You can see what it's doing. It's starting here where we defined it, and it's smearing it out. How much smear do you get? Well, there's a couple of controls here which can be quite confusing. you have the vector blur slices here. Again, this has to do with vector information. And you can, if we come to, like I say, let's come to this version here. Again, this is not pre-multiplied yet. You can see the alpha is not going to change. So ultimately, when we come to the pre-mult, we're back to where we were before. So if I take this to the grade node here and put it to pre-mult, you can see the alpha edge has not changed. We are not allowed to change the alpha edge, right? The alpha edge is the alpha edge, but we have to deal with this stuff. So what do? Well, the edge extend fixes that by smearing everything in, okay? So there's a couple of options here. There's a pre-blur control mat. You can hover over these and see what it says. Blurring the control mat by a moderate amount will increase the width of the extended edge. Some of these variables play in the amount of the extension, so it's hard to kind of explain these. This is the number of iterations of the vector blur. And then as you can see, the pre-blur vector, it'll tell you in these that it actually helps in the extension. So the vector length is the biggie, and you can see just the extension itself. It's kind of pulling it more and more in. Let me go ahead and put my viewer here. So you can see the vector length is still pushing it in, right? And then you have the pre-vector blur, which kind of pulls it in even more, right? And then you have the pre-blur control, and you can see how that has a play in the pullout. So we can see here we have a couple gradients here. If I put this down, let's put this to vector blur slice to 1. You can see it only does it one time. You can do it 5. A lot of this has to do with the ghosting effect that you would get in the process. Also, how many times does it actually slice up? How many times does it repeat the same pixel over and over again? So it has to do with the distance as well. So you can see if I take the vector length here, you get different results of the way you want it. And sometimes you want to have it more original to the original shape, and sometimes you don't. So it's basically what it is. And now you can see here we have the output extended RGB. You can also export vectors if you wish. And then you're going to have to pre-mult the image here, because the final output of what you get from these edge extends is the image, but it's not officially pre-multed back to the original alpha. So if I pre-mult it, now you can see what we've done. We've solved the problem, but we've introduced some artifacts around these tight corners. It doesn't look too bad here, right? It's just when you get to these corners, things get a little bit goofy, and then they start to swerve a little bit too, because it's taking the information here and using the out vector direction, according along the normals, if you're thinking of CG, and pushing it out this direction. So it's not going to push it out this direction because it's facing this direction. This is the perpendicular direction, right? So that's why you're getting these weird pixels. Now, on a very small scale of this, you can get away with this. So you don't want to push it too much. You want to push it until you get rid of all the artifacts, and then you're good to go. So in our case, do we need to go this crazy? Well, let's go back to our edge extend here and start fiddling with these controls and see if we can find something that is, oh, see, there's the green. Green's starting to get introduced again. So I just want to push it just enough. And then just play a little bit with your pre-blur vector and vector length, and you'll see that, again, it's not a perfect deal. If you had a checkerboard image, you'd be in trouble. But if you have skin tones, it's a little bit more. If it's just one constant color, like in our actress, whether around her hairline or skin line, you're not going to see this differentiation. But if you did had some alien character with checkerboard skin, you would definitely start noticing this stuff. So anyway, let's go ahead and see how it looks with the final product. So here is with the sun behind it, and let's go ahead and come over here and just disable this. Here's that green line. You can see what it did. So now we're going to see the artifacts that approach when we overdo it in our regular comp. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at this image. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and disable or enable this and see what we get. So we're going to notice this around these edges here, right, that I was playing with earlier. Let's go ahead and enable it. And I didn't push it too much, and it helped significantly, especially in these areas. We still have this green tinge that we could either get rid of by going into our D-spill and fixing it, but you can see it worked really well in these areas here. Now you could key mix this in, by the way, and have a mask for only certain areas. So you can actually have multiple key mixes of different intensities of the edge extend that are roto animated for different areas that might be needed, right? One of the things you can see, it blurs the image. So here you can see is a streaky effect. Here we have these defined lines in the hair, and it's giving this weird streaky effect. And when you have multiple layers of semi-transparent, fully transparent hair, when you streak that image across into a direction, it's sort of offsetting itself from the actual alpha edge. So you might get some very strange results, like for instance, you might get a little bit of the shirt color and the hair color being pushed in, okay, which in this case doesn't look too bad, but you can see how it can start infiltrating those areas. So you can see here, it's not too bad, but somebody might pick up on that. They might go, wait a minute, why is the hair, what is this all about here, right? So that's why you might isolate this to an edge that has no hair in it, okay? So you can do that with rotos and key mixes, as I described earlier. Key mixes go crazy with those things, I'm telling you. You can see here, again, weird artifacts. You'll get this blurry edge. You see we've lost the granularity, so you can see here, this is this and this is that, and you can actually come in using a edge detect, if you wish, on your alpha edge and try to reintroduce or regrain this image if you prefer. If you find that this is too much, so you're actually adding a regraining of the area that's been blurred. So just keep in mind you've actually blurred your image. So any grain, even though this image might be most CG nowadays, most green screen stuff, there's two different methodologies. One is take your stuff that you was shot on a green screen, degrain it all, so there's no grain even in the RGB channel, and then regrain everything at the end when the CG is added. Simply because the continuity is a little more straight on, whereas some people are purists and they want you to match the grain of the back of the foreground plate of the actor to the have the background plate match the foreground plate, which is more difficult, and in this case would actually involve using an edge detect to come in here and only isolate the edges of this character that have been blurred to re-add grain to those specific areas. So it can get really fishy when it comes to the edge extend. Just be aware of the many different possibilities of this. And again, we haven't solved the problem completely here. I can overcrank this like crazy if I wish, right? So I'll go nuts. Let's go ahead and just crank some of this stuff up. I'm going to try to get rid of all that green tinge, right? This also depends on the filter road. So if I come to this filter road, this is the edge I'm extending. I can also come in here if I wish and harden up this edge. So if I hit the grade node, put this to alpha, I can actually say, okay, let's go ahead and take the black point and pull this down. I can also play with the gamma a little bit, pull that in. So again, I'm redefining that edge because blurred edges are going to be tricky. So now if I come back in here, take a look what we have now. Now you can see if I take this grade node and disable it, it's actually readjusted the defining edge that gets smeared out. But here is a perfect example of where you're getting blurry edges. So again, you can see the issues that we have here. Again, this streaking ability. And again, if you come into this edge extend, it's an interesting thing. If we start this back down to we'll put this back down to say 1 here, right? We'll put this, everything basically down really low here, right? So you have the vector length and all this. So you can see by increasing the vector, let me just go ahead and bring these up a little bit, vector blur slice, you can see how it's sort of almost in a, I would say, logarithmic fall off, how it's kind of spreading out the extension. And it's a repeat of the last pixel, so you can see right here, it would take this pixel and repeat it. So there's a blurring and a repeating of the pixel as we kind of move across the vectors here. So let me just go ahead and just kind of give it a little bit more pre-blur there. So again, the artifacts are evident here in the hair, right? If I come over here, it's just look at that, ugh, right? And not too bad here because this is all one consistent color, right? When you get into issues here, here's where you're getting her actual shirt infiltrating in. I'll go ahead and disable and re-enable this. You can see what's happening. It's taking this line here, smearing it out, and causing this issue, and then here's the skin tone getting infected into the hair, almost like the hair's been cut off here. So it is tricky, And this is where you would involve masks. So for instance, you could come in here and just create a key mix like so. And I'll just go ahead and plug this in. Actually, this will be the A, this will be the B. And I'll just go ahead and make an extension here. And we're going to go ahead and create a roto, and we'll plug that in. Obviously add a blur. Don't want to do anything without them blurs on them rotos. And we'll just come in here and choose the areas that we want this to affect. So let's say if I come in here and choose this area here and this area here. Again, these rotos can be tracked in or manually animated throughout the process. So even like right here is fine. Let's see, bring this up here. The whole hand actually is not too bad. Let's go ahead and kind of, this is a seagull, by the way, if you're curious. So I'm just kind of, just coming in here, and I could just, even extend this off into this, and make this one whole roto if I want. But you can kind of get the idea of what's going on here. That way the hair is left to itself and it's not being affected. And if I still have issues, like for instance down here, this is actually just a highlight of the light hitting her, so it's not technically bad. But again, if you wanted to deal with this area, it's going to be very hard to come in here and add this part of the key mix because it's going to start to affect this area here. But you could do it. Again, there are many different ways. You can always, like I said, the first priority, come back to your edge here, go to your edge despill, and look to see if you can isolate that area. So if I come to the mix of the core and the edge here, you can see that this halo, it could be like blue pixels that need some work or something that be causing that. But again, first priority, and then last case scenario, desperate but very subtle edge extend.